Carolyn Chen, legislative analyst with the County Council. Good morning and happy Monday morning quarterback for Super Bowl. Today, what we'll be doing, we will be going through the Maryland Senate amended relief package. Very, very exciting. We did get an initial list of the bond bill initiatives with the state, and in your first chart on page A are the four bills that we are seeking a council position on if you are inclined to, and the most latest email that came out should be the county executive positions on the four bills. That was not in your packet, but I did send that in the email, so if you have any questions, I can forward that to you right away. First, let's just start off with OIR. Ms. Wagner?
Good afternoon. So what's going on? Just the big picture. Tonight is the second night that the House is actually coming together as a body. They met on the opening day of session, but then generally kind of went their separate ways and have been working virtually since then, although a few number of people have been actually on the House floor just to do the work of the body, accept bills that are introduced, and et cetera. So, and today is the filing deadline in the Senate. The filing deadline was Friday in the House. This is the bill filing deadline. So by hopefully tomorrow morning, we will have probably the breadth of the work that will be before us for the remainder of the session. They have been busy though. The governor brought in an emergency piece of legislation that we discussed, I think, on our first meeting, the Relief Act. It's Senate Bill 496. And the Senate took that bill up quite quickly in budget and tax. They left all of the provisions that the governor included in there intact, but then added on a significant amount of money to fund some other initiatives that I would kind of describe as some areas that they felt like had not been easy to recognize. I think the governor's package, largely does some things that were a little bit more obvious. I think that the budget and tax amendments that have now passed the Senate, so the bill is in final form out of the Senate, identified a few more programs. I know that the council president was involved in this, and if he'd like, I would let him take the lead in talking a little bit more about the bulk amounts of money in the package and where it's going from here. I believe that just on that detail, the Ways and Means and Appropriations Committees are taking up provisions probably as I speak. And I believe that their version of this piece of legislation will be out on the floor on Tuesday or Wednesday.
Sure. Thank you. Is that my echo or someone else's? No, but okay. I hear an echo. Well, Mel, thanks. I don't know if I have very much to add. I think my colleagues are all aware the council has been asking the governor for additional local aid throughout this pandemic, with at least a couple letters we've sent. Every time I've been in touch with the governor's staff prior to the holidays, they were always saying, don't worry, there's going to be help coming from Washington. And then the help coming from Washington disappeared. So at that point, several statewide nonprofits and some of the council presidents from large counties and comptroller and treasurer and I all came together with one event before the holidays and one event after the holiday, calling on state leaders to use the rainy day fund and the surplus to provide some of the local aid we need and the help that working families and small businesses need. And I'm glad, obviously the governor responded and the Senate has made the proposal better and the House is in the process of making it still better. I've been in touch with the Speaker's Chief of Staff and the chairs of the Appropriation and the Ways and Means Committee, and we'll see what we get. But yeah, it definitely means larger cash payments for unemployed residents that have been stuck in the unemployment system, and grant availability for many of our small businesses, and some tax relief as well. So I think it's all welcome and sort of overdue good news from the state. And hopefully hopefully the House will make it, dramatically more meaningful. Does that Is that what you wanted?
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Just broadly, I sent this to the council president yesterday, just a sheet that reflected kind of the categories of this program and what level of investments were being made in it. And I know that the package that the governor brought in, you talked about 1.2 billion, and then the Senate added on about 520. My numbers don't exactly add up to that just because of the way I did it, but roughly for direct investment for individuals is about 803 million. And then direct investment to the private sector and nonprofits out of this package looks to me to be about 1 billion. And then a reinvestment of sorts from the public sector back into the public sector is about another 185 million. So again, we look forward to seeing the fingerprints from the House on this package and its swift reconciliation and swift enactment because there's plenty of need out there.
Have you shared that update with everybody?
No, I just shared what's in the packet, but I'm glad to send that on as well.
Yeah, I would share with everybody, please. And I think the top lines that everybody's, I bet, most interested in is how many low-income residents will get how much money from the state and how much is available for small businesses. In addition to that, there's money for volunteer firefighters and other tax breaks and stuff. But at least those are the two that I think are
sure. And the information in the packet does provide a little bit more detail than this listing, but the more information, the better. So, I'll send that on as well.
Okay.
The only other thing in the packet that I just wanted to bring your attention to, and Christine or Carolyn mentioned it, is just that the fact that there are local bond initiatives going to be introduced this year. And so we'll be tracking those. As I understand it, there will be no match requirements on anything this year.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so that's good news. We just started to create the listing for you. We would assume that there will be more coming in, and we might have probably a more comprehensive list by next week. And as that gets updated, just for your information, we'll go ahead and forward that out. And that, Carolyn, turning it back to you.
Thank you so much. Moving on, we're going to be looking at.
Hey, Carolyn, before you move on, can we
yes.
take some questions from my colleagues?
Yes, of course.
Yes, Council Vice President Albornoz would like to.
Thank you very much. Just on bond bills, I've always been curious about this because they're obviously critical, and there are so many important projects across the board, district by district, and it's been my experience. It's a little bit of catch as catch can, and so I was just curious as to, from your position, Melanie, how do we keep track of? Or do we keep track of requests that come in for bond bills? Does the delegation have an internal system in place as it processes those? They're all worthy projects, but I'm just curious, especially in tight capital budgets moving forward, how the delegation, or is it more organic in how they make their decisions on which projects to support?
I think, this has always been a little bit different. Delegations handle this differently. But I think that, lots of times, sometimes districts will support a specific project or a package of projects, and all things get prioritized. So our delegation chairs, work with their members on what are the most important projects that they're bringing forward. And obviously there's a limited amount of money. There's usually only 12.5 million that comes in typically in the governor's budget for bond initiatives. This year, again, he did not fund anything. So the General Assembly, the budget committees will have to find room in the capital budget to bring in money for these projects. So not everything gets funded, and they are typically prioritized by districts through their delegation leadership. At least that's how Montgomery County works on this.
That's right. Yeah, it would probably be helpful, Mel, for everybody to understand with greater specificity. Yeah, I mean, individual delegates and senators propose these. They are proposed as districts often as well. The sort of case is assembled. They make the case with third-party advocates in front of the committees. And then, yeah, there's a tracking sheet that the money committees, at least appropriations in the House, has, for all the bond bill requests, for Montgomery County. It would be great to get that from our appropriations leaders and then, share it.
Yeah, we actually usually provide it to them. We do the tracking for this.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Okay.
Right.
So maybe sharing it with us as well would be helpful to help
And
everybody.
that's the listing we have right now. Again, this is a little different sheet because, as I understand it, there will not be any match requirements this year. So yeah, we'll just we'll keep sending you the information, and if there's questions about the projects, I mean, we'll try and help you get answers. Some of them are in your district, so you probably know a lot about a number of the projects that are on that list. So. Yep.
Or we might not, and we might want to send
we
might want to send in a letter of support or something like that. So yeah,
right,
keeping everybody here apprised would be really great.
Right. Another process difference this year is that there will not be any hearings on these. It's just
Okay.
The council president or people that are familiar with Annapolis know that that's usually 2 days of hearings. They're generally time inefficient. And typically, given how the bills are prioritized, I mean, it's an opportunity for community members to say their piece, but given the circumstances we're living in today, I think that the General Assembly decided they would not do that this year. But it doesn't mean we can't send in letters of support.
Okay. Any other? Oh, Councilmember Friedson.
Yeah, well, a couple of things on the Relief Act piece. First of all, I just want to acknowledge, I mean, we talked about the council's role, which I think has been somewhat limited, but the Senate delegation's role, which has been, I think really significant, and appreciate all of those efforts in working together with them. I know Council President Hucker, excuse me, and others have been in close touch with the Senate delegation. It's welcomed. Certainly, we always want more, but certainly a welcome development. It's going over to the House now, as you noted. I think it would be helpful if we got a little bit of an update specifically of anything that we see happening, any priorities that we might have. I do think, one example would be the child care piece of this. Delegate Solomon is helping to lead that effort. That's a really significant piece for us, has been obviously a major priority of this council. So I just think we could get a quick update on that, and then any other similar items that we think would be, major elements that could be added or changed on the House version. I think it would be helpful for colleagues and members of the public to be aware.
Well, we do have a piece of Delegate Solomon does have a piece of legislation in that I think sets the opportunity for childcare to be moved into this package. His particular piece of legislation is, I think, a $25 million appropriation. And while I've been in touch with our leadership in the House on this package, I don't know a lot about. I think that there will be some changes. They've mentioned a few of them to me, but I don't know where they're, if they're going to be working within this amount of money and making changes to the package, or if they intend to add. My suspicion is that they intend to add. Although it sounds like, unlike the Senate, they do plan to tweak some things that I don't know if they're in the governor's original package as introduced or things in the Senate. I will note that we still have an ongoing issue with this package, and that relates to the unemployment insurance benefit piece.
Thank you.
So I'm continuing to feverishly work on that, but I don't have a guarantee of a resolution that would be perfect so far.
Okay, you took my next question, so I appreciate you answering that. I know that's still an ongoing issue, but I think we need to make sure everybody is aware of it and that we're all working towards it. It's not just our challenge, it's all of the counties and the city of Baltimore that have this issue, and we're all working in lockstep. Councilmember Rice and I are on all of the regular MACO calls, and he's leading the way there, and continue to do that. That takes me to kind of my next question. I don't know if now's the most appropriate time, but the fiscal dynamics. This is the fiscal consequences of this particular relief bill related to the county, but there are a number of other major items, major priority areas for the county, for MACO, and the other 23 jurisdictions across the state. And don't know if now is the appropriate time to just ask for an update of what the key areas are and where things currently stand, including the holding harmless of MOE if you level fund education, for instance, and some other key areas, I think would be helpful just to get an update, Mr. President. But if it's out of order, then feel free to take it up at a more appropriate time.
I think it's fine. I was going to raise the previous topic too. So before we leave that, can we just make sure everybody understands? Mel, can you just state the problem as Andrew was describing it, the unfunded mandate from the governor's package on unemployment insurance?
Yes, it's an awkward position for counties to be in. The governor's proposal, as he introduced it, provided relief from state and local taxes on unemployment insurance benefits retroactively and actually into perpetuity. So the governor's bill continues this outside of the pandemic era, but into perpetuity. So the problem is this kind of, I call it the hump of local government's share of this, which is about 165 million statewide. And for Montgomery County, the hump part, which I'm saying, the significant unemployment, so a lot of benefits went out. So retroactive and the period of time that we're in now would result in a reduction, estimated reduction of local income taxes for Montgomery County of about $32 million. So that's tough to swallow. So again, we are, spent a lot of time over the weekend on this one again. So we're continuing to work on it.
Maryland's always had low unemployment insurance benefits compared to other states. Instead of increasing that as he could have, he just eliminated the state and the local taxes on it.
That's right. And there are solutions here. It's just, there are a variety of ways that this could be addressed. It's just a matter of will. Okay, that's what I'm going to describe it as.
What would be helpful? Is there a strategy? In terms of what we're advocating for. I think my sense is I think we're aware that this exists. I think the question is, what's the path forward? Obviously, some of this is nuanced, but what's our broad-based strategy? What are we asking for? And what's MACO asking for, and what do we think is most likely? I think, to me at least, I think that would be most helpful for colleagues to, for all of us to understand, what is our ask. We can all be, asking the same thing. I think frequently we're all having conversations with different folks within the delegation across the state, and I think it's helpful that we're all reading off the same sheet of music. So I think it'd be helpful, rather than saying we're concerned about this and we want it to be addressed, saying, this is, at least at a high level, what we would like to see and what we're asking for.
Well, I've been fairly specific with them about ways to resolve this problem. And, but the goal is the same regardless, to not bear the brunt of a $32 million revenue reduction that can be ill afforded by Montgomery County and is even harsher punishment on some other counties.
Right. And some House leaders have said they're well aware of this problem and they're planning to address the flaws in the Senate package by finding another source of revenue to cover that in the governor's package. Councilmember Rice, do you have anything to add on that topic too, on your calls?
No, I think that, again, what you've laid out in terms of, look, there are so many moving parts to this piece when it comes to where it is folks want to strategize that their resources are going to be coming from. And so whether it's through some of the bills that will deal with specific appropriations for particular things that we're looking for reimbursement or supporting, it really is that continual moving target, as Mel and Tom knows all too well, that continues to add up to what some sort of finality is. I appreciate where Councilmember Friedson is coming from, saying, like, what's our target? What's our strategy? But the challenge is, because there's so many different pieces that all contribute to what that overall target number would be, that it makes it difficult to say through this relief package, this is what we want. I think that we continue to press for as much as possible. And then with some of the other additional bills that are out there that deal with reimbursement, as well as additional supports for one of our major cost drivers, which is education, we have to be respectful of that as well, that's additional funding that's going to be coming our way. So when we look at what our total get is going to be, you know, it's going to encompass all of those things. So.
Mhm. Okay. Anybody else on this topic? Or should we move on to the bills? Seeing no requests. Ms. Chen?
Thank you, Mr. Hucker. We are now moving on to page A, the Bills for Council position discussion. The format is I will read the bill number, council priorities, state the bill name, and the positions that we do have. Turn it over to the OIR analyst to make comments, as well as the council staff to make comments, and then we'll take questions. The first bill up is number 2, HB 52, cross-filed SB 454. Our council priority is COVID-19 relief and economic recovery. The bill name is Real Property, Alterations and Actions for Repossession and Establishment of Eviction Diversion Program. The council staff position is support. The county executive position is support. The housing, BHCA, as well as the Office of the County Attorney, no position at this time, and NACO is not tracking this bill. So we're moving to.
Do you want Amy to talk a little bit more in depth about it? I mean, big picture, but just enough details so that
exactly.
people would know.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think briefly.
Amy Svan? Yeah.
Good afternoon, everybody. So the purpose of this bill, as you can kind of tell from the name, is to reduce the incidence of judgment of repossession and promote continuity of housing. What this would do was require the chief judge of the district court in any county that has over 10,000 claims for repossession a year to establish a diversion program. Now, Montgomery County falls into that category. We have somewhere between 45 and 55,000 claims per year, according to the last OLO report. And then the district judge could also set it up in counties that have less than that. What the program would require is the facilitation of screening of tenants and provision of eviction prevention service providers. So that would be social work counselors, finance assistants, ADR, and that sort of thing. In addition, the bill sets out some requirements for the landlord prior to filing, because as you know, here in Maryland, they can just simply file. And so it requires them to give a certain amount of notice and then attempt to reach out to the tenant to work on facilitation of a payment plan or financial assistance prior to filing the complaint. If the tenant doesn't reach back out, then they can file the complaint. But there are also provisions in here that give the court more leeway in terms of requiring alternative dispute resolution if they would wish. They can stay the eviction if there is health or danger to the lives of the tenants. So that's, basically the crux of the bill. It's creating a whole program in larger jurisdictions, and then giving a little bit more leeway to the court to find other ways to keep people in their homes. The county executive does support the bill.
Okay, any comments?
Move to support.
Councilmember Rice moves to support. Councilmember Reamer, is that a second or a comment?
Sure, second.
Okay, all those in favor?
I have just a question.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
Please, I just saw it.
It's more of a clarification. I'm a little confused that the county executive would like us to support, but DHCA that works for him thinks that we should have no position on this, and the Office of the County Attorney has no position. I'm just a little confused as to kind of.
Those positions that they were, I believe, taken by council staff from our tracking system was just simply to say they had no issues with the bill, not necessarily an affirmative no position. They had marked it that way, and oftentimes that occurs when there's no problems with it. They didn't necessarily take issue or anything with the policy, and the county executive ultimately chose to support the bill.
Okay, so I'm understanding how this process is now working, because it seems to be a moving target. DHCA and the kind of implementing agency or related policy agencies, it's something that necessarily be implemented. They only provide objections, but not necessarily recommendations.
No, that
Ultimately,
they
the
do.
county.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
They do supply recommendations, and in this case, they did not supply a recommendation on the bill. On several
I would
other
just say,
things.
from my perspective, it seems odd to me that we would not be taking no position on a housing bill that our housing, that involves the judiciary, that our attorney and our housing committee say take no position on. Not that I have any real objection with it. I don't really feel strongly about it, but if all the point of that being included is to say they have no objection, I think that's different than saying no position. And so I just want to clarify that and understand what our process is again, because I think this exercise seems to be a bit of a moving target, and I'm not sure I can necessarily always track down how things get on the list, who's recommending them, and where things stand. So I just wanted to clarify that again. It has nothing really to do with this particular bill or the merits of it. I just want to make sure I understand before we vote on it, since that aspect seems somewhat.
Sure. I believe the recommendation for this bill to be on the list came from council. It is a bill that is being prioritized by proponents for renters, and it is linked to the other bills that have come out of some of the task forces.
And Amy and Mel, to Councilmember Friedson's important question, I've always understood if a department doesn't have a position, it means they don't have a position. It means they don't have a recommendation for us one way or the other, right? Not that they're recommending that we take no position.
That is correct.
Right. It's information that you may or may not find helpful. I mean, it's information.
Yeah, the council can take any position at once. They don't have a position on it at the departmental level, right? The county.
That's correct.
In this case, with this bill, the county executive is for it. His cabinet level agencies don't have a position on this bill. Correct? Right. Okay. Councilmember Navarro.
I think, I appreciate the clarification, because it is kind of a moving target, and I'm a little confused as going into this. Usually, we are told if the county executive has taken a position, or if we're just waiting on that. It doesn't mean that we cannot move forward, obviously, but I think it would be great to make sure that we have that column in our chart as much as possible, and also clarify this notion of whether departments are, what does that mean exactly? So just appreciate if we can be consistent with the process so we can make informed decisions. Thank you.
Councilmember Reamer.
I remember we had this conversation, I think, about recommending no position versus not taking a position yet.
Yes.
And there are important distinctions that will at one time or another become relevant. So I would suggest, for council staff that they figure out a way to distinguish between recommending no position and have not yet taken a position. You could leave it blank if they haven't taken a position yet. You could just could identify them as a relevant agency, but then not have anything. But we'll leave it. We'll just ask you to please share this with us so that we know the difference without having to ask. Tom?
And to be clear, I don't remember anytime a department has encouraged us to take a position one way or the other. I don't understand that to be their role. The role of our OIR staff is to tell us what positions major stakeholders have. What does the county executive think? What does the Office of County Attorney think? What does the Department of Housing and Community Affairs think? And then the council can do whatever it wants, but it'd be very unusual in my memory for any of them to tell us what they think we should do.
I suppose that might.
Excuse me. I don't think that's at all the discussion here. I mean, I recall us spending an entire retreat just on this issue of how to manage the state ledge process and how should we get the appropriate information so that we can make our informed decisions. So I'm just requesting that we revisit that to make sure that we're all on the same page obviously we're just receiving this information so that we can make an informed decision on the spot. But I know that we spend quite a bit of time talking about and agreeing on what would be the, the process. Sorry, Councilmember Reamer, to interrupt.
Okay. I mean, I do remember at one point at least council staff recommending that we take no position on something as an affirmative position for us to have. So, anyway.
That's different than agency staff is all I'm saying.
Maybe.
I think we should know their position. I don't remember them telling us what they think. We could solicit that, but I don't think, Mel, is that your understanding?
Yes.
All right. So
just to back up on this just for a second, one reason why the county executive's positions may not have been in the chart is we meet with him at 10 o'clock on Monday mornings. So sometimes, there's not been time to put his positions in. But when we seek feedback, it's just information, that county executive or the county council can adhere to or make a different decision about.
Okay, so I'll just finish up here.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of to Andrew's point, this seems important and consequential. It seems very positive. However, it is a lot to come to us without knowing whether implications for all of these issues has been, sorted through and whether we would have amendments and so forth. And so, I'm willing to sign on and suggest we support it, but we're not doing a very significant dive here on what the implications are. We could try to do that, but I've also, it's been suggested that we had decided that departments would not take positions on things and that only the executive and the council would do that. Is that, certainly in Annapolis, maybe this goes to Councilmember Navarro's point that we had kind of a framework, but I think we might need to ask OIR and council staff to take another look at that and see how we had decided to do that. Okay.
Be glad to.
Yep. Carolyn, if you and Mel could work together to get us the results of our recommendations, decisions from that retreat.
Sure.
Thanks.
Mr. President?
Mr. Glass, go ahead.
Real quick, not to belabor this good process-oriented conversation, I will just say that 2 years ago when a bunch of us came on and thought that this process could be refined a bit, I would suggest to council staff to look at the way the packets were structured last year, which I think were pretty streamlined and pretty detailed. And so that's my short recommendation.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else? Okay, we have a motion to support, well, Councilmember Friedson.
Yeah, no, well, I was just going to say, I mean, as we look at that, the idea that if we're not going to get positions from agencies, then we should streamline that, because the idea that the county, I mean, I don't see a scenario under which the county executive's agency will contradict the county executive. If that is what we're looking to get, then we should set up a process that allows that type of commenting. But I assume that when we get DHCA's position in an executive agency, that is the position of the executive. So if that's not the case, then we should create a process that sets that up. I mean, OCA is maybe about legal concerns, but it seems odd that we would have DHCA, if it's no objection, that's different. But I just think that we ought to really think through what that looks like, because, if we're basing our decisions on what we're receiving in the packet, then we ought to think through that. And I also think it would be helpful, to Councilmember Glass's point, as we think through this, to determine, what ends up on the calendar for a vote and how that process works, and make sure that's clear to everybody as well. Thank you.
But, well, just to respond to that, it's not my expectation, Mel, tell me if I'm wrong, that the county executive should have a position on every one of these bills necessarily. Often a department might have a position on something that they are affected by for operational or clarification reasons. The governor certainly doesn't have a position on every bill in the General Assembly, but the departments that are affected by them may have a departmental position that, with the governor not having any position at all. And I think that's normal at our level as well.
Yeah, I think it's again, anything coming from the departments, it's coming through our workflow system, the capital impact system, and they're taking, let me just tell you how we tag bills. In fact, we get the daily synopsis, that bills that are being introduced, we read through that package, we look and see what we think might be of interest. It gets loaded into our workflow capital impact system. Once the bill text comes out, we read the bills and decide if we're going to send it on to council staff and agencies that would be able to provide what we would hope some valuable feedback, just feedback on whether or not what the problems are with the bill, whether good, bad, and different. I mean, sometimes these are very kind of rough, 4 lines about what they think, and it's just purely informational. And the county executive looks at that, but there's times he doesn't take any position at all. We don't even take in the pieces of legislation. Right. And then there's times that he decides that was great, that was interesting input from my executive branch agency, but I disagree, or I agree. It's just, it's information. And it helps us decide, how we're going to manage a specific piece of legislation, whether or not we're going to take it to the county executive, and whether or not the council staff believes it should come to you. But it's just additional information that is that.
Okay, thanks. Anybody else on this? Okay, we have a motion from Councilmember Rice and a second from Councilmember Reamer to support this bill. All those in favor? That looks unanimous. Great. Okay, Ms. Chen.
Thank you, Mr. Rucker. The next one, actually, Ms. McMillan will be on for this as well, and Ms. Salmon. Reference bill number 3, HB 729, cross-listed with SB 530. Council priority is COVID relief and economic recovery. Landlord and tenant, eviction actions, filing surcharge, and prohibited lease provisions. Council staff position is support. Office of County Attorney, no position, and MACO not trust.
Okay. Is there a motion on this bill?
We have staff talk to us about it.
Yeah, sure. So I'm sorry. Yes.
So this bill was put in at the request of the Attorney General, and what it would do is it would raise the surcharge on failure to pay rent, tenant holding over cases, and breach of lease cases. Currently, the failure to pay rent charge is $15. Tenant holding over and breach of lease are both $46. This bill would raise it to no less than $180 in Maryland for each one of those. It would also prohibit the court from assigning the charge to the tenant under any circumstances, and prohibit any lease provision that would require the tenant to pay this. All surcharges at this point are deposited in legal service fund and used to finance legal services for indigent clients. This would be a significant increase, but as I understand from what I've read, this is more in line with the national average. Ours was significantly lower.
Move support.
The motion to support, second from Councilmember Rice. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor. Great. I think tell me if I'm wrong, that looked like everybody. Okay. Thank you. That one is recommended as well. Ms. Chen.
Next bill, reference number 7, House Bill 761, Senate Bill 632. The council priority is expanding local authority. The state bill name is election law, contested elections. Council staff position was support. The county executive actually wanted to hold on a position for more info. There were some questions on specifically for this bill. BOE, Board of Election, also weighed in, did not submit a position, and NACO has no position as well. Ms. Boucher, do you want to give an overview on bill number 7?
Thank you, Carolyn. I guess the first thing to say about this bill is that it came about because of a request from council. You may recall that the GO committee discussed a number of issues relating to the county's own public campaign financing law during the summer, and that one of the issues that bubbled up in that discussion was the extent to which the county could use local funds to support recount efforts for publicly financed candidates on a local level. And there were discussions with Jared Demarinis, the counsel to the State Board of Elections, and he essentially advised the council that that the county didn't have authority to decide to use public funds in a recount situation, but that it was a very good idea for the state to address this issue and to allow the creation of recount committees and how to handle both private and local funds. So what happened then was, of course, we took that to the county executive. The interest in the council, that came ultimately as a request from the full council for a bill to provide that enabling authority, and took it to the county executive, and he, of course, supported that effort. We then went to Delegate Kaiser and Senator Kagan about seeking that bill, and they were very helpful, very interested in supporting that effort. But what it also led to was lengthy discussions between Senator Kagan, Delegate Kaiser, and Jared Demarinis at the Elections Board and committee staff, that essentially what the delegate and senator decided was that it actually was a missing link in our state elections law, period. It wasn't just an issue of local public financing systems. It was that there was unclear statutory authority for, allowing the creation of recount committees in any situation, or how to handle, just deposits, donations, disbursements, etc. And that the State Board of Elections have been struggling with this for years. They had some regs dealing with some portions of recounts, but legal counsel, Jared Demarinis, just felt like even he didn't have solid legal footing for appropriately dealing with recount situations. And so what happened is that this bill came about, which is a comprehensive bill to address the use of public or private funds in any recount situation. And so it starts off with doing that. It prohibits the use of funds received from somebody else unless a recount committee is established. It sets up, again, comprehensive rules governing requirements about a designated bank account, donation limits, transfer limits, loans, when loans can be accepted, when they can't, reporting requirements, record keeping, etc. So it does that, and then it provides some enabling authority for localities that have their own local financing system. And it first requires that a publicly financed candidate at the local level, that that a local system must allow a candidate to establish a recount committee. It gives a local jurisdiction authority to provide public funds in a contested election to the recount committee, and it allows a local jurisdiction to provide more stringent regs regarding campaign finance activity and a contested election situation. So, and just for full disclosure, the sponsors also decided to address two other issues in this bill. Right now, under current law, any candidate can petition for a recount. And then the question becomes, who pays for the recount? This bill would prohibit a candidate from even seeking a recount if the difference in the number of votes between the winner and the runner-up is greater than 5% of the total votes cast. So it does that first, and then
we might be at a level of detail that we might not need to be at, is my guess. If you don't,
Sure. I just follow your lead. I mean, so the question, I'll leave it to you for questions. The question is whether the bill really gives you the enabling authority you thought you needed. We've run it by Christine Wellens, and I guess I'll let Christine speak for herself as to whether it does give you the local enabling authority you desire.
Christine.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Yes, I had reviewed the bill and believe that it does in fact give you the desired level of local authority, and therefore the council staff was recommending support of the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Friedson.
Yeah, that basically answered my question. I mean, this does much more than we had asked for, but we asked for this bill in the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee as part of our deliberation. I just wanted to make sure that it does what we intended it to do, which is to make sure that somebody who is involved in public financing has the ability to participate in their legal right to a recount, and that we had a structure in place in order to appropriately do that. If this bill, is the vehicle to accomplish that and just does also some more, and the things that it does that are more things that we support as well, then that sounds good. But I think the explanation actually was helpful, because this is not the direction that we ultimately had suggested we go in, but if it's even better than what we had asked for, then great.
Right. Okay.
Move support.
Councilmember Navarro moves
Second.
support. Councilmember Katz moves second. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Great. Okay, Ms. Chan.
Thank you. We're on to our last bill for today's meeting. Number 8, House Bill 638, cross-file Senate Bill 624. Our council priority here is reimagining public safety. The bill name is Public Safety, Untraceable and Undetectable Firearms, quote unquote, ghost guns. The council staff position is support. Montgomery County Police Department also submitted a position of support, and NACO is not tracking this bill. Would you like a summary from OIR?
I can.
A quick
Yeah.
one.
Okay.
Mr. President, Sarah Morningstar. I'm sorry, I don't know why my camera's not on. I apologize. Sorry about that. I don't know what's going on. This would be, it's HB 638, SB 624. 624 will be heard in JPR on the 17th. Oh, here you go. Start my video. There we go. Okay, hi. So the Senate bill will be heard on the 17th in JPR and on the 1st of March in Judiciary. The bill would close the loophole in current law to restrict possession of untraceable firearms by regulating under state law. These untraceable guns would require the unfinished frame and receiver to have serial numbers. This is we ran this bill by the county attorney's office, and the comment was that it could bring into question the validity of the local bill 4-21, Councilmember Albernaz's bill. And I had a quick back and forth with Christine Wellens. So Christine, if you want to comment on that at all, but that was just the one comment that we got. The county executive supports the bill.
Thank you, Ms. Morningstar. Yes, I would say I did see the comments from the county attorney's office that if Mr. Albornoz's bill passes and the state legislation passes, I mean, they're very compatible in the sense that they are looking to do the same thing. They're the same goals in mind here. It is because the state preemption for in the criminal and public safety codes is frankly very complex when it comes to firearms regulations. It is possible that the state bill, if both pass, that the state bill would be preemptive. But I would also point out that it would be preemptive in a way of accomplishing the same thing as Councilmember Albornoz's bill. So that's why staff thought that it would make sense to support both.
Mr. President, if I could say a couple words.
Sorry, Councilmember Vice President Albornoz.
No problem. So First of all, thank you for that overview. The two bills are very complementary, and frankly, I'd be happy if the state bill passes and supersedes the need for our legislation at the local level. But this is not the first time this bill has been introduced at the state level, and we are starting to see locally some of the feedback from the opposition, which includes hobbyists, but also very well organized lobbying bodies on behalf of the gun lobby that are, discreetly coming in and watering down some of the very reasons why we are introducing our bill in the first place. So while there would likely have to be modifications to our bill, the most important thing that would stay if the bill at the state level passes is that there be congruency in the definition of what we define as ghost bills, which would be valuable for local law enforcement to be able to enact so that it eliminates any potential confusion. But I think the two bills are immensely complementary. I hope the state bill passes. I strongly support it and hope my colleagues do as well. And if it does, we'll revisit our local bill and make the amendments as necessary.
Great. Belt and suspenders. Any other comments? Is there a motion?
Move to support the state bill.
Second from Councilmember Rice. Terrific. Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Great. I think that is unanimous. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Recommended as well. Ms. Chen, what else do we have?
We are done, Mr. Upper.
Can I just request on behalf of all my colleagues, probably, Mel, I think it would be helpful to have a written update on the bills that the council, it's always good to talk about these things moving forward. I'm curious, I bet my colleagues are, about what's the status of the bills we've already prioritized that you're working hard to advocate for. We've had a lot of discussions of those, and I don't remember seeing an update. So a written update on those would be really helpful.
Sure.
Cool. Councilmember Reamer.
Thanks. Just wanted to suggest that we have a public safety day soon. There's a lot happening in Annapolis.
Yeah.
And I know Melanie prepared a really helpful background summary of everything. So it would be good for us to, weigh in as appropriate. And so just wanted to ask for that.
Okay. Ms. Chen, you could try to schedule that. Thank you. All right. Any other comments, questions, insults? Okay, great. Thank you all so much. Terrific meeting. I'll see you all at least tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks. See you guys in education and culture.